Hi there, my name is Scott McDonald, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to run on Trampwall. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you how to comfortably run any wall, whether it's 5 feet or 25 feet. Before learning how to wall run, you should be very comfortable bouncing on your back. If you're not, please check out my tutorial right there. If you've ever had neck or spine issues, I highly recommend consulting a physician before you start learning how to run on a tramp wall. Independent, unsupervised training always comes with a risk of injury, so please be safe. All you need to get started are a trampoline and a wall, preferably a rectangular 7x14 competition style trampoline. Because a circular tramp is circular, there's not a whole lot of flush space between the wall and the trampoline. I recommend against trying to learn tramp wall on this. Trampolines are designed to push you towards the center of the bed. If you stand right next to the springs and jump straight up, it's going to push you centrally. For this reason, if you're using a super tramp, which has extremely wide springs, you have to fight much harder just to stay at the wall than if you were using a regular rectangular trampoline. I also highly recommend investing in a pair of wrestling shoes. Every single show that does tramp wall uses wrestling shoes. They're very lightweight, they have very thin soles, and they're grippy enough to keep you on the wall. If shoes aren't an option for any reason, whatever you do, do not learn tramp wall in your socks. Socks are slippery. Walls are slippery. You're gonna slip and die. Don't do it. Barefoot is less risky than socks, but more risky than shoes. Anything that might be sticking out, whether it's a splinter or a bolt, is gonna get you. Speaking as someone who has impaled their heel on a bolt and not been able to walk for 2 weeks, shoes. When you first start doing tramp wall, you're gonna wind up with a little bit of abrasion and potentially waffle marks on the backs of your shoulders, your lower back, and even the back of your scalp. These marks aren't actually damaging you, but they can be pretty uncomfortable and sensitive. For this reason, I recommend wearing a shirt that covers your lower back and your shoulders. If you have any piercings, I would take those out before the trampoline does it for you. Even if you spend quite a bit of time doing flips or bouncing on your back, you can still expect to have a stiff neck when you start working on tramp wall just because it's hitting it from a slightly different angle. One final disclaimer, make sure the wall you're running on is sturdy and grippy. You don't want to be slipping when you're taking steps, and you don't want to go through it. No drywall tramp walls. As a general rule, the wall is your friend, and you want to have your weight in the wall. Most people, when they first start trying to learn wall running, are afraid to actually go to the wall. So here's a drill we're going to use to get over that fear. All you're going to do is bounce on your feet, jump and put all fours on the wall, and you're going to fall to your back. If it's possible, I highly recommend having a friend throw a mat for you because it's much easier to fall flat on your back comfortably when you feel safe. Many people initially feel weird about changing angles from upright to flat, and they leave their chin and their chest up, but this causes you to strain your neck and whiplash against the trampoline. As with regular back bouncing, you want to make sure you land completely flat with everything from your tailbone to the back of your head. Once it feels comfortable to go to your back, instead of just falling, try to push yourself off the wall. The more force you put into the trampoline, the more force it returns, and the easier it is to physically run on the wall. This isn't necessarily a really aggressive martial artsy kick, it's more just a directional push. Now that we've gotten over the initial weirdness of going to the wall and your first bounce, let's work on building height and control. The entire time you're doing wall running, you want to maintain eye contact with the wall. Wherever you spot tends to be where you go, so as you come off your back, you're going to kick both legs towards this point. Once you've left the trampoline with your back, you're going to start rounding your chest and picking your torso up towards the wall. You don't want to pick it up to be parallel with the wall, you just don't want to leave your chest lagging behind. You want to aim at least midway up the wall, and then lift your chest only once you've left the trampoline. You'll notice that right now my feet are at a pretty comfortable shoulder width even stance. Once you can comfortably bounce like this and go from the wall to the trampoline consecutive times, start experimenting with doing a split stance, as if you were doing a lunge. The majority of your force is going to go into the first foot to contact the wall, and then as your second foot goes on, you can start picking your chest up towards it. When you're fairly upright and you've shifted your weight to the top foot, the bottom foot might come gently off the wall or just go to this releve, but then as you fall back past it, you're going to shift weight to the bottom foot again and push off. You can also experiment with what your arms and hands are doing. A lot of circ shows use this very exaggerated arm technique, but it's not really necessary. You can just keep it loose and lift your shoulders, but what really matters here is you don't want to put your arms straight overhead. which tends to pull you away from the wall, and you definitely don't want to let them dangle behind your back. Every time you bounce, you want to be actively using your hips and your kick to take you away from the trampoline and into the wall. You also want to reach with your arms and pull your chest up towards the wall. You want to have a flat foot make contact with the wall, and you don't want to feel like you're just touching it. You want to feel your force go through the wall and use it as an anchor point. Just as in back bouncing, where the retraction of your knees towards your stomach increases your power, the push off of the wall gives you more force than the push out of the bed. So the more you push off the wall like an aggressive plyometric lunge, the faster you're going to build height and control. I don't mean you have to go so hard that it's exhausting, but it makes it a lot easier than just kind of nimbly tapping the wall. Wall running is a misnomer. It's just 2 steps. Step, step, fall, push. You see a lot of people who start learning and they think, oh, wall running, crouching tiger time, and they just try to scramble their way up and down the wall. This is inefficient, and it will actually inhibit the amount of height you could potentially get. In order to maximize height using just these 2 steps, at the apex of your second step, you can actually pull your chest up and kind of give yourself just the teensiest little Mario physics boost. And then as you fall back down, the more you push into the trampoline, the more it's going to return you. With this push, I'm pushing with my second foot. I wait until I fall off the first, start to descend past the second, and then I push into the trampoline. If you push from the first foot at the apex of your bounce, you risk falling out very far and potentially smashing your skull against the frame, which is not fun. Whichever foot makes contact with the wall first is going to be the main driver when I push back off. In this video, you'll notice that I'm demonstrating most things short ways on the trampoline. In some shows, just because of the available setup, you're going to run long ways on the trampoline, but in most, it's going to be short ways. Given that springs are designed to push you towards the center of the trampoline, if you run short ways like this, the springs behind your head are going to help push you back towards the wall. However, you also run the risk of hitting your head on the springs or the frame. This will eventually not be a concern because you're going to learn how to control the bounce, but at first just be wary of it. On the other hand, if you're running long ways on the trampoline and you have all this boundless safety behind you, not so scary, but you have to work much harder to stay towards the wall. The springs here are pushing you away from the wall quite a bit harder. A wall that goes up to about 6 feet from the bed is probably the ideal place to learn. Anything taller than that and it can be kind of intimidating, and anything shorter than that it tends to feel very rushed. A block is much less intimidating to learn on, but everything has to happen pretty much instantaneously when you leave the trampoline. If the wall you're running on has a ledge, then obviously getting onto that ledge is your ultimate goal here. As you approach the top of the wall, don't artificially inhibit your height. Instead of staying at where you're comfortable, float a little higher, push a little harder. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can build height and triple the height you were just running at. You want to float and try and put your feet as close to the top as possible. Make sure that your second foot, the one that's going to be on top, doesn't go over the edge. You only want to place the sole of your foot on the corner in this sort of crane landing position. Doing this will ensure that you can get your hips into a position where you can actually stand up, but without tipping yourself into a suitcase when you fall back in. If the foot is too far on top of the wall, when you fall back, it might get caught, and this is not a good time. It's also crucial as you get to the top of the wall to make sure that your shoulders and chest come fully upright. You don't want to be sitting back here in the abyss because then you just fall back in. The goal is to be able to stop yourself on top of the wall at any time. The bottom foot is going to stay attached to the face of the wall so that when you drop back in, you have somewhere to push from. A great drill for learning how to generate power and height is to stand on the frame of the trampoline, jump to your back, and see how quickly you can make it to the top of the wall. The idea is to minimize the bounces while maximizing the height. Once you're comfortable running at height, you can also skip out on the whole height building process by bouncing high on your feet before you make contact with the wall. The best drill in my experience for getting on top of the wall is to have a friend stand up there and reach out their arms like you're gonna high-five them or a trapeze catch or something like that, and then actively try to make contact with them. As this becomes easy, have them back up further and further so that you're forced to pull your chest over the wall and actually get on top. Once you can comfortably run, you can also try skipping your feet entirely and bouncing to make contact with both hands on the face of the wall. Another great drill is to try to consciously beat the height you just ran at with each subsequent bounce. Keep your eyes wherever you had just kicked to, and then aim higher with the next one. Wall running is really easy once you've got the technique dialed in and you're no longer afraid of it. But until that point, it can be awkward and intimidating. So let's go through some of the different things that go wrong and how to fix them. Make sure that your chest is coming up to at least horizontal. A lot of people will leave their chest back when they first start running, but this tends to drag your weight away from the wall. On the other end of the spectrum, make sure that you're not immediately picking up your chest, as this tends to make your feet pass the bottom of the wall and start to flip you prematurely. Putting your arms overhead or dangling them behind your back is going to make it really difficult to get your chest to the ideal position. Make sure that you're reaching forwards and up, even if you're only using your shoulders. A lot of people underestimate the force with which they need to kick towards the wall. You don't want to just be making contact with the wall, you want to be able to sink your weight fully into it. The height at which your first foot contacts the wall is going to dictate the potential height you can gain. You can't make contact at the bottom of the wall and then magically rocket your way up 15 feet before placing the second foot. So make sure that you consciously delay the placement of your first foot before stepping with the second if you want to gain any height at all. This isn't necessarily a mistake, but I'm just going to reiterate it because it is a big safety concern. Make sure that you're wearing wrestling shoes if possible, and if not, be barefoot. Do not wear socks to do Trampwall. Don't do it, you're gonna die. Make sure you're not staying too close to the wall. Many people do this at first, and it puts you at the risk of suitcasing yourself and tipping too far backwards, plus it's just really difficult to build force from. A common mental issue is to actively suppress and inhibit your own potential height because the top of the wall is scary. I remember when I was first learning Trampwall, to see above the ledge was terrifying. It changed the whole thing. Just remember that what you're doing hasn't changed, even though you're getting higher. Also, the higher you are, the less physical effort it takes. One final mistake that I mentioned earlier, but I'm going to reiterate. Once you get to the top of the wall, do not put your foot all the way over the top. Only put the sole of your foot on the corner like a crane landing from parkour. As a general rule, if you don't feel like you can forcefully push yourself away from the wall, then you probably aren't close enough. Make sure that your pushing foot is flat against the wall. When you're learning and you're not that high on the wall, the timing of your push might seem irrelevant, but try not to get in the habit of pushing directly from the top, as this can take you way too far out. I prefer to wait until I feel my body passing my lower foot and then pushing myself out and down at roughly a 45-degree angle. I'm not pushing myself straight down, and I'm not pushing myself so far out that I'm going to hit the springs. Also make sure that your running position is a comfortable stance. You don't want to be so awkwardly wide or narrow that it feels like you're tripping yourself. As with most unfamiliar things, Trampwall can be pretty intimidating and uncomfortable at first. When I first tried it, I really didn't like the idea of bouncing sideways. I really didn't like the idea of throwing my face at a wall. Everything about it just felt kind of off. But if you stick with it, these feelings go away and it quickly becomes really fun. In this video, I didn't cover how to drop back in from the top of the wall because I'm going to make a separate tutorial entirely dedicated to that. But just know that if you've done all the homework in this video, it's going to be super easy to wall run from that takeoff. On that note, I'm going to wrap up this tutorial and start working on that one. So, I hope you enjoyed this. If you found it helpful, please let me know. If there are any questions you have, feel free to leave them in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, good luck and happy training. Bye.